today's hearing is one of those moments where both sides of the aisle want to come together and figure out what we can do to fix the problems that exist within the Postal Service. And so I want to be clear that I support the Postal Service. I've talked a lot about my mom because she currently works for the IRS. But when I was a little girl, she worked at the post office. And so she got her introduction into federal service at the post office. She worked as a part-timer. She was a mail handler. She worked her way up and ended up in HR. So she kind of understands so many different levels of the post office. But as a member of Congress, I get the calls about the concerns. And so I want to just kind of put some things into perspective really quickly. I remember when I was growing up as a little girl, I was taught how to write letters. Something that I don't know is going on now in schools, but the difference was when I was growing up, we didn't have the internet, not when I was a little girl. And so it's my perception that once the internet came along, because I know I stopped sending as many letters, people started using things like email instead. And what I feel as if is going on with the post office is a lack of agility to adapt to a changing environment. And so I'm curious to know, and it's really to follow up a little bit more on what Chairman Comer was asking about, is as we are thinking about the future of the post office, what are the out-of-the-box thoughts that we have as we're looking at the fact that we didn't have the internet before, which meant that every time you wanted to put something in writing to someone, you literally were either trying to do a telegram, a fax, or you were actually just sending a letter. And I think the preference was to send letters, right? But as you've acknowledged, that's not where the bread and butter is for the post office. As someone who also lived in East Texas, which is a little bit more rural than Dallas, I understand how thinly stretched y'all are, but what are your thoughts? I mean, and when I'm asking this, I'm asking about, I don't know if there's been thoughts about the potential of drones or whatever technologies may be available, which then would not only reduce the carbon footprint, but also would make sure that you're not needing the level of staff that is necessary to kind of do some of those routes. I did have a chance to sit down with the postmaster in my area to talk about some of these things. He's talked about the difficulties that he's had with hiring. He's talked about some of the things that have been brought up as it relates to the crime that's happened with a lot of postal workers. And so I'm curious about that. And also, and finally, I'll kind of end on this note and allow you to kind of elaborate on your thoughts. But in my district, UPS, I believe it is, they're going to get me if I'm wrong, but they're now doing autonomous vehicle testings in a route. And so I know that those that I would consider to be competitors of the post office seemingly are already, 50 years ahead of us in kind of like what they're doing. And so if we are going to be, say, the preferred provider as it relates to packages, like, are you looking at what the competition is doing as it relates to FedEx and UPS and trying to figure out how do we stay or even get kind of on the playing field with them? And I'll allow you, because I'm just curious about the future.
Thank you for those thoughts. First, Congresswoman, we are about 15 years behind in every operating and modern-day technology and logistics thing that we do. And we have to, that is our bread and butter. We have to get our mainstream business working right, which is moving mail and packages across the country and delivering it to the American people together. And there's a huge, huge benefit for us in terms of cost and revenue, and a big benefit to the American people in terms of timely service into the rural communities and so on and so forth. That's job number one. We have a broken operating model and a broken business model. The second thing is in terms of how do we reimagine our retail centers around around the nation that will be able to build on this increase in commerce. We will become, if we pull this off, an enabler of commerce, right? Things will get delivered that don't get delivered now because it's from the Postal Service. And there will continue to be a growth in home delivery and e-commerce and so on and so forth. And we're there, we're pursuing a number of different issues with that, and we're reorganizing our whole customer outreach, sales, and marketing groups to actually start working on solutions for commercial business, for mailers, for communities, and so on and so forth. So we need to start thinking like that as we're mending this broken thing. And we're going to have some good ideas from that. Now, there are a lot of changes I would love to make, and if I owned the place, I would make tomorrow, okay? But I don't own the place, and
I'm out of time, but if you can just give me one, because that's why we're having these hearings, because if I have an opportunity to produce legislation, that's what I want to do.
yeah, so I would move faster is the first thing on everything that we're doing. I mean, the plan is baked, it's cooked, but we have a very, very large stakeholder group that has a lot of interest in many things, and have witnessed over 15 years the consequence of not moving forward.